The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear. And the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist. But we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees, even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is LON STRICKLER. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Folks, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio, where we explore the unexplained live on Beyond Explanation. I'm your host, LON STRICKLER, coming to you within a cannon shot of the hallowed fields of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Now, Arcane Radio and Beyond Explanation channel are made possible by you liking, subscribing, and sharing our programming. Super Chat donations are essential for us to continue offering you our unique content, and your consideration is very much needed and appreciated. So tonight, I welcome W.T. Watson to Arcane Radio. Now, W.T. or Will is a writer of both fiction and nonfiction. He infuses his work with his knowledge of cryptids, monster lore, magic, Forteana, and the paranormal. W.T. brings a unique shamanic and magical perspective to all of his works. Over 30 years of exploration in these topics. Now, when he is not writing or reading about monsters, he can be found outdoors allowing his dogs to take him for a walk around the neighborhood in Kitchener, Ontario. He lives with his spouse, Stacey, in a townhouse that would be jammed with books if it weren't for e-reading. And WT recently published a book with Beyond the Fray Publishing, my publisher, entitled Phantom Black Dogs, Walkers of the Liminal Way. So, Will, thank you for joining me this evening.
Avoid confusion. In everyday life, I go by Travis, which is my middle name.
Oh, okay, Travis. That sounds good.
The Will thing is a long Facebook story.
Okay. Well, it is what it is. I have a lot of people I talk to, and everybody has their little moniker or their little, their author name or writing name and such. So I get it. I understand it. So black hounds, hellhounds, and such. What's the nexus of all of this? Where did this all start? Why did it become what it was? And how'd you get involved with it?
Well, as you mentioned, Beyond the Fray is both of our publisher. I originally published a novel with Beyond the Fray called Hunting the Beast. And when I was doing the research for that novel, I wanted something different for a main character. I just, everybody was writing werewolves or vampires or, something along that line. So I went to where I always go. I went to the lore and started reading some stories here, there, and everywhere. And I came across a really interesting shape-shifting stories about, or a shape-shifting story about black dogs, which became the seed for the novel.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, because I wanted to be able to speak accurately about this phenomena in the book, I did some more research. And as I was doing that, I was thinking to myself, wow, this would make a terrific book. And after we published the novel, Shannon said, have you thought about writing a nonfiction follow-up for this book? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I have. And that's where the book Phantom Black Dogs, Walkers of the Liminal Way came from. Now, when you start talking about black dogs and their origins, I think you have to go way, 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 way back in history. Dogs have been associated with death almost from the time that dogs were domesticated. The first dogs were domesticated thousands of years ago, and from wolves, of course. And it wasn't long before those animals started to be seen in graveyards. A carnivore is going to take advantage of any free meal it can get, and human remains are not off limits. So dogs quickly got associated with death. And then when you start to look at history and mythology, you have beings like Anubis, the black jackal of ancient Egypt, um, who became, of course, the guardian of the underworld, and a psychopomp who led souls to the Duat, and to their judgment there. Later on, you have Cerberus in the Greek mythology, who is also described as a guardian of the underworld, also described as dusky. But if you look at the pottery, he's black. And in Norse mythology, as you move on a little farther, you discover a dog named Garm, which was the guardian of their land of the dead. We move up into the medieval time period, and in the 1500s, there was a story out of Bungay in England, of a black dog that supposedly invaded a church there and actually killed some people. And then you move forward in time into history. You start to get these historic witness accounts in about the 1800s, 1900s, and so forth. So I think the black dog has a very extensive history. And you read these accounts and you find out that there's a lot more to this apparition, though, than just a death apparition or a death portent. Mm-hmm. There's, I talk about in the book, there's all kinds of high strangeness that goes on around these animals, these apparitions, except that they do have some physical reality too sometimes. But your two main types of black dogs seem to be the death portent and what I call guardian black dogs, which appear and actually assist people. So.
It's interesting. I when I first started writing on the blog 15, 20, 16 years ago or so, I of course the big stories about hellhounds and black dogs were coming out of England for the most part. Cannock Chase is probably the biggest area. Mm-hmm. You had the old stories about in London where people would be chased by these things. Of course, everybody knows the Hounds of the Baskervilles and possible connection there, or some type of phantom being or such. And, I guess it's something that we have, it's kind of eked itself into a lot of different cryptid stories. And a lot of what you write about kind of can fit into these other canid cryptids as well, the upright canines, the dog man and such. So what have you learned as to why these things appear? Is there an actual reason why they appear? Are they from some dark side, or what are they usually associated with?
Well, as I said, I kind of divide my black dogs into two different territories. There is definitely an association between the phantom black dog and death. Mm-hmm. There's no getting around that. Even the people who would like to say otherwise, when you analyze their data, you have something like, I talk about this in the book, you have something like a 20% chance of either a death in your family or the witness actually dying after a black dog sighting. So that's way above, the statistics for chance. But what I point out in the book is that, I think that this hellhound thing is kind of overblown. Mm. Sometimes the black dog does appear as a very frightening apparition. Mm-hmm. There's no getting around that. You have this monstrous dog, sometimes with glowing eyes. Back in the day, it was often described as the size of a calf or of the height of a tabletop. Nowadays people tend to equate it with large dog breeds like the Great Dane or the Mastiff or the Newfoundland. But it gives you an idea of just how massive this thing is. It's a very large creature, usually. One exception that I know of. And you get the glowing red eyes. The eyes are described as being the size of saucers. So typically, can be a very scary apparition. On the other hand, you can have a black dog that appears that people actually confuse for a normal dog of a large size, but confuse for a normal dog. And in my reading, in my research for this, I found that a lot of times these more normal apparitions appear in that more guardian role that I was talking about. So these guys actually, the very typical story, and yes, a lot of these are from England, but there are also stories from Canada. There's quite a number of stories from south of the U.S. border. There are stories in the United States as well. So it's not just a British phenomena. There's actually black dog stories in Europe too. But the kind of typical story is that you'll have a person, often a young lady or a minister of some kind, who's walking from point A to point B, from one village to another in England or whatever, often walking. They will encounter something that they regard as a threat. May just simply be a dark forest. It may be, a group of seedy-looking individuals down the road. May actually be robbers. And suddenly, this dog will appear by their side. Usually, very large dog. Doesn't seem to want to get close to them or interact with them, but is very much aware of their presence. I talk in the book about something called that I call the black dog stare, where this apparition is intelligent and has regard for you. It knows you're there. It's looking at you. This dog will walk along beside this person until they are past the threat, whatever that threat may be, and then it disappears. One of the things that we see very typically with black dogs is that they seem to be very territorial. They have like a section of road that they patrol, or that they're known to quote unquote haunt, and are not frequently seen outside that area. So I think on the one hand, you have black dogs that appear in this guardian role. I tell a story of a young man who's in Norfolk, England, who's riding back to his home village after attending a dart tournament. He's riding his bicycle. One of the interesting things about black dogs is you can't outrun one. Nobody's ever recorded being able to outrun one. He's riding his bicycle. He sees this large dog on the side of the road. He finds it frightening because he's afraid he's going to get chased. And sure enough, he passes this animal, and this animal takes off after him, and he can hear its pitty-patting paws on the ground behind him, which gives you an idea that this apparition's got a kind of a physical presence. The dog whips around the side of him, and he says he can smell it. It runs out in front of him and stops in the middle of the road. And he jumps off of his bicycle and puts a bicycle between him and the dog because he's afraid he's about to be attacked. About this time, down the road a little ways is what the British call a spinney. It's a group of trees and bushes and so forth. Out of this spinney comes this car, comes rocketing up onto the road and, skids sideways and goes taking off down the road at a high rate of speed. And this fellow realizes that if this dog hadn't stopped him, he would have been at that driveway and very likely would have been injured or killed. So, everybody likes to talk about the scary black dogs with the red eyes and the hellhound, what they want to call a hellhound. There's a whole other aspect to this apparition that people don't pay attention to, and that's that guardian aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the aspect that you're talking about, that people generally think of as a hellhound, which I don't really like that usage, because I don't think that the black dog has anything to do with the Christian place of punishment.
Right.
It just doesn't hit me as being something that's associated with that. It's just simply another type of apparition.
Mm-hmm.
But those other death portent dogs are the ones that can be scary. As I said, in about 20% of black dog witness cases, either the witness or somebody in their immediate family passes on, within a year of actually sighting this creature. So I think those are kind of two reasons why the black dog appears. Sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes this thing shows up in somebody's pathway and obstructs them, and we don't really understand why. Because black dogs are known to just stop in the middle of roads and not allow people to pass, or stop at a gap in a hedge and not allow a person to go into a particular field. That may have something to do with the guardian aspect we were talking about earlier, or it may have something to do with that territorial idea that we were talking about earlier. It may be that the dog just doesn't want you on his turf.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's just so much in the lore of these creatures that you can talk about. That there's all kinds of reasons why they can be there.
I noticed in your book that you referenced several my posts, some of my accounts that I've posted over the years, and I think most of those were here in the United States. But what are some of your better accounts from either anywhere in North America, particularly U.S., Canada, and such?
Well, so one of my favorite black dogs. If I had to pick out a favorite,
Mm-hmm.
there is a version of the black dog apparition in an area of Maryland that has the wonderful name of the Snarly Yow, which I really enjoyed. I don't know where they came up with that name, but it's so evocative that you just you have to love it.
I have heard that term on several occasions.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in Maryland for 40 years.
There you go.
I live in southern Pennsylvania, so that does occasionally come. I think that term is probably from Old German. I'm not sure. But, the black dog, upright canines, dogman, werewolf, whole thing, when these Germans came to the New World and set up farming and stuff, a lot of that came forth. I mean, a lot of the old world traditions and lore started to make its way here, and people were seeing these things. Now, were these thought forms or these actual beings? I don't know. But it makes some good stories.
It makes some excellent stories. So the Snarly Yow, a lot of the stories that I have for Snarly Yow come from a book called South Mountain Magic, which I don't remember the exact time that it was published, but it was early 1900s, I believe.
Oh, I know the book particularly. I know the story.
Yeah. So there are several black dog stories in there.
Yeah, these were Appalachian folk magic people.
Oh yeah,
powwowers. I've got powwowers in my family from way back, so I've heard a lot of this.
Oh, I'm sure.
Some of it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like. So I love those stories because you have a situation where fella's gone to the general store and picked up some stuff for his family, and he's trotting on home. He's walking down the road, and Snarly Yow walks out in the road in front of him. Now, most people would look at this big honking black dog and say, you know what? Maybe I'll go another way. This guy says, nope, he's going to put his packages down. He's going to move that dog out of the way. And he starts wailing at this apparition, which obviously he can't hit. But the really interesting thing about this particular Snarly Yow story is that the more he tries to hit this thing, the bigger it gets. It actually grows in size. It's one of the shape-shifting aspects of the black dog lore that's pretty common, is this idea that the thing will grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger. There's a story in England where it gets as tall as the trees. So he's wailing away at this thing. All he succeeds in doing is making himself tired. Now, we have no idea why this dog decided it was going to block that path, but eventually it just goes away. It disappears. And he goes on about his way. He goes back to his cabin and says he saw Snarly Yow, and it didn't go well for him. By the same token, you have another guy, same book, same set of stories. Sees Snarly Yow while he's out riding, and he whips his rifle out, and the author makes a point of telling us that this guy is a crack shot. He doesn't miss. Apparently Snarly Yow is immune to bullets too, because this guy fires several rounds at the dog, and nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. It kind of reminds you of the Bulletproof Wolf and the Hunt for Skinwalker book, if you recall that story. The United States too is the only place that I found a black dog that's not massive. There's a black dog in Connecticut, I believe. It's called the Black Dog of the Hanging Hills. And there's an interesting story about that one. This black dog is spaniel sized, and it looks exactly like a little black dog just running around in the hills. But the legend behind this creature is that if you see the dog once, it's for your joy. If you see the dog twice, it's for your sorrow. And if you see the dog a third time, it's your death. And the story that appeared in the papers about this geologist who goes up, he's with a friend of his. They go up into the hanging hills, and they're taking rock samples and doing what geologists do. And they see this black dog. Now, the fellow who wrote the report had seen the dog once before, but unfortunately his companion had seen the dog twice before. And upon seeing this dog, he promptly slips on ice and falls into a crevasse and dies. So the guy who saw it twice, it was for his sorrow. For the third time, it was for his death. So my recommendation to you is, if you're going to this area of Connecticut and you want to look for this dog, if you see the dog, leave and don't ever come back, because we don't want to take any chances for you. So those are some American stories that pop up. I talked to about the Phantom Black Dog of Valle Crucis, which you documented in Phantoms and Monsters. And by the way, I have to tell you, I absolutely love your blog. It has been such a source of inspiration over the years. I've always been interested in the things that go bump in the night, and it's nice to be able to keep up with the things that are going on currently too, because I spend so much time immersed in the history of things.
Right.
So the Black Dog of Valle Crucis, the legend is that you have two young men who encounter a black dog that comes out of a churchyard at the crossroads there. But the interesting thing is that there's actually a witness account that almost exactly mirrors that sort of urban legend account that we have, where a woman and her husband are driving along, come to pretty much the same place. They see something come out of the churchyard, and at first they're not sure what it is. They thought it was a bear. It was so big. Thing stops in the road, typical black dog behavior, and turns, the glowing red eyes on them, and they're like, okay, we're out of here. And much like the two young men in the more urban legend account, they beat feet and made their way somewhere else because the thing scared the bejesus out of them. Now, none of those other than the Black Dog of the Hanging Hills, none of those seem to be death portent stories, though. So,
right.
Although there are some death portent stories in the South Mountain Magic.
A lot of my family grew up, was from the Western North Carolina area, and in the Smoky Mountains, and a lot of these, well, they call them hellhounds out there, but
Yeah.
a lot of these large dog, black dog stories originate from those mountain areas, the Appalachians, and so I've been hearing this stuff all my life, and
Yeah.
that story you mentioned, I think that was in North Carolina, if I
Yeah. Via
remember right.
Crucis is in North Carolina. Sorry,
Right.
I forgot to mention that.
No, that's
Yeah.
all right. But no, that state seems to be rife with these type of stories, and I, of course, I think a lot of it has to do with the culture. But this, I mentioned earlier about the Appalachian folk magic and all that together. I think if you ever talk to root conjurers in that area, they will bring up these black dogs occasionally.
Oh yeah.
It's part of what they do.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you get into the juxtaposition between the black dogs and the magic stuff, then I talk about that in the theory section. But yeah, I mean, when you take into account the fact that a lot of the settlers in Appalachia were from kind of my homeland, which is, my mother was born in Scotland. I'm about 70% Scottish and Irish. So a lot of the people that ended up in Appalachia were Scottish in origin. And I know some folks who would be called fairy seers in Ireland. And they're of the opinion that when these folks came over to Appalachia, they brought their spirits with them. So all those fairy spirits, all of the fun things that you read about in books like, the fairy faith in Celtic countries and stuff like that, a lot of that stuff ended up over here as well, including black dogs.
Absolutely.
So there's definitely a correlation there. My book is written as an introduction. Okay.
Right.
I wanted to introduce the subject to people, give them some good stories about some of the weird stuff that happens around these dogs. A lot of the stories in the book are from England. And what I was trying to do was, as I said, put together a group of stories that were interesting, that kind of hung together and demonstrated some of the weirdness that happens to these guys. There's a ton more lore out there.
Oh yeah,
just a ton of it. If you wanted to write the complete compendium of black dog stories, I'm betting it would be hundreds and hundreds of pages long. But a lot of those stories
a lot of them out there.
Yeah, a lot of those stories are pretty much the same though, so I didn't want to repeat myself over and over again. I agree with you, Elon. I definitely, and as you said, there were a lot of German settlers in those areas too, and they brought their own set of beings with them too. The interesting thing to me was, again, talking to the fairy folk people that I know, is that they said that when the Scots first came over here, for a while they felt bereft because they didn't have their spirits with them, right? It took a while before the spirits caught up with them, apparently. And then they started to get their contacts back, and things started to go back to more normal in their other world, I guess, which I thought was really interesting.
We had a question in the chat from Blue Crossroads. Was there an old tale of a black dog in the UK that entered the church and attacked the congregation back in the 1800s? Can you relate to that?
Yeah, that much earlier than the 1800s. It was actually in the 1500s, and there were actually two churches. They were the churches in Bungay and the name of the other town slips my mind. It is in the book though. So the legend is, and this is a legendary account, and it comes from a tract that basically was written by a religionist of some kind. It's all about trying to get people to repent. So I'm not sure how much stock we can place in the stories, but the basic story is that there was a tremendous storm in August of that particular year, and the storm apparently was so bad that the members of the parish were afraid that the world was going to end. So they all gathered in the church, and were, as they say, hearing the divine office. And this black dog allegedly appears, and during the course of its rampage through this church, it kills a couple of people and cripples one guy. Now, the interesting thing about this story is that the black dog is supposed to have killed these people by wringing their necks. And last time I checked, you had to have thumbs to do that. So I'm not sure exactly what whether that was supposed to be a shape-shifting thing or whatever. Yeah. The other interesting thing is that the fellow who was crippled, the text reads that the black dog griped him. It gripped him. It actually got a hold of him. And as a result, he dried up like shoe leather. Now, I don't know how you survived that, but apparently this fella did, and went on to live for some time after that. Then the dog departs from the church, going actually through the doors, and it's said that the dog left burn marks that look like claw marks on the door of the church that you're supposed to be able to see today. There's some confusion in the local lore about whether this was actually a black dog or whether it was actually the devil that appeared in the church. So I'm not sure how much stock to put in this story. There's also a major discontinuity in the story because the guy who wrote this is telling us that the vicar, the individual who's supposed to be running the divine service, at the time this was all going on, was up a ladder cleaning the gutters of the church in a storm and got hit by lightning, but apparently survived. So, this is obviously a very old account. It's obviously a legendary account, and I don't know how much stock to place in the account, given that the last page of this pamphlet is actually a prayer of repentance, to get people back into the church. So I think that there's probably a good possibility that a lot of this was made up to scare people into going back to church. But yes, there was a story. And it is alleged to have happened, and it's one of those things that gets cited all the time in black dog lore because it's supposed to be the first account of a black dog. So
there's something that Brian Linville brought up, which I have heard of. And have you heard of the blue dog of Rose Hill in Port Tobacco, Maryland? I've heard this. I don't really know the whole story behind it.
I've heard of it. I didn't include it in the book because it's a blue dog.
Yeah. Sure.
I mean, there are any number of dog apparitions out there. The Scots have something. The Scots have something called the Cushy, which is a fairy dog, which is the reason that some people maintain that there aren't more black dog stories coming out of Scotland. There's the Cushy in Scotland, which is white and has green ears, or red ears, or can be absolutely green, which would be a really interesting thing to see. I have heard of the blue dog. I don't know the story though.
No, I don't
honestly,
either.
I have a chance to research that one.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, in this part of the country where I'm in here, there's a lot of German influence. There's a lot of Swiss influence, just like with the Amish and such. And, in the Amish faith, in their lore, you hear a lot about demon black dogs. They don't really talk about it a lot. Every once in a while, you get somebody to coax them into talking about it. But
there's a reason they have those hex marks on their barns.
Well, that was the Pennsylvania Dutch had actually done that. That's a lesser group.
The Amish,
but absolutely,
not the Amish, but
the hex sign is a big part of protection. And look, the Dwayyo, which is
Yeah.
a dog or upright canine dogman type being that was first started being talked about in Western Maryland when these German farmers moved from Pennsylvania into Maryland. But we've been hearing it up in Pennsylvania, in this area around Gettysburg, and this whole southern Pennsylvania area.
Sure.
But yeah, when you talk about dogs and canine cryptids and such, we're kind of in the middle of that here because we get a lot of reports.
Yeah, I've looked at your dogman map.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and there seems to be some correlation between phantom black dogs and what you might call a man wolf or dog man.
Yeah.
But most of your phantom black dog sites, I think I found maybe 2 phantom black dog stories where the dog actually got up on its hind legs and walked around. And I do differentiate the two because the phantom black dog takes a very specific form, that that kind of giant red-eyed form, whereas your man wolves and dogmen are bipedal upright canids that look that people almost always describe as a werewolf. And so, in my mind, they're kind of 2 separate things because the dogman seems to have a much more physical presence too. You don't have stories of people, taking a swing at a dogman and having their hand pass through it. So the black dog is actually more of an apparition, but it can have physical effect in its environment. Whereas, it seems like the dogman is more of a physical manifestation of something. Now we can go on and on about what that could be. But,
absolutely.
But the interesting thing is that, again, when you start to talk about your phantom black dogs having a physical effect in reality, it usually has something to do with their guardian aspect. So, for instance, there's stories of people being lost on mountainsides in the mist, and encountering something in the mist, that a dog, and they don't realize what it is that they're dealing with, but this dog that blocks their way again, is always trying to get in the way of something, and then they discover as the mist clears that if the dog hadn't stopped them, they would have walked over a cliff. So, and again, and then the black dog does that stare thing that I'm talking about and then disappears once the threat is passed. So a lot of times, when you have the black dog having a physical effect on its environment, it's again acting in that it's got to stop you from doing something role, which I find very interesting, very intriguing.
I have had reports, and not really long reports, but just people getting a hold of me and mentioning, I was looking out into the woods and I see the red eyes and I don't really see a form, but then I see it moving about like that of a dog. And, then eventually I will see a dog form in the red eyes that, and most of those always seem to be some type of apparition, something that shapeshifts or, moves in and out of our reality. And, and it's hard for me to even comprehend what exactly that is. But, the red eye thing, that's normally associated with something that's non-corporal or something that's, not flesh and blood. Of course, these sightings we get with the upright canines and such in Pennsylvania and Maryland are mostly like that, flesh and blood, something that seems to be supernatural, interdimensional, but has a form, an actual solid form to it.
Right. When it's on this side of the veil, it can do some damage if it wants to.
And I think we've been fortunate not to have that happen, though. These things tend to stand their ground. People walk up onto them, and even if they're armed, they're kind of like, well, I'm not taking a shot at this thing. We've had people have taken shots at these things, and it goes through them, or you get the blood splatter, but there's nothing there. The thing takes off and leaves. So
personally, if I had to choose between the two, I would take the phantom black dog every day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because yeah, as you said, I've heard people. I think Shannon LeGros is the one who's always talking about how that the dogmen are just pissed off, you know. Um, and it's true. These guys seem to have a real attitude problem,
Yeah.
and they are very territorial. The interesting thing to me, though, is that the phantom black there's a crossover in behaviors where phantom black dogs and dogmen will both sometimes chase people,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't catch them.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to figure, a phantom black dog, for instance, was once clocked running next to a motorcycle, and keeping up with it,
Yeah.
no problem.
Yeah.
These creatures, if they wanted to catch you, could catch you.
Oh, absolutely.
Your dogmen too. If they wanted to catch you, they could catch you.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I think what you have is territoriality, where this creature, whatever it is, whether it's a phantom black dog or a dogman, is actually defending its turf. And it's bluff charging you basically.
Absolutely. I
And
feel the same way. I have
yeah.
even cryptids altogether. A lot of that
Oh
seems
yeah.
to be like sentinels or guardians.
You see that in Sasquatch sightings all the time.
Absolutely.
Where
And
you get too close to this thing and it'll make a run at you. But come on. Again, with the Sasquatch, you have a creature that moves like a ghost through the woods, and goes up and down hills like they're not even there. If the thing wanted to catch you, it could catch you.
mm-hmm.
you know but we have a whole bunch of witnesses who say that it ran them out of whatever area they were in, but they came to no real harm other than the trauma to their psyche.
Mm-hmm.
This is very I'm getting outside of my wheelhouse talking about phantom black dogs, but I've been studying this stuff for years and years, and
Right.
there's a lot of correlation there. You see a lot of that same kind of behavior, whether you're talking about Sasquatches or dogmen or phantom black dogs, or the goat man of Denton, in Denton, chasing people out of its territory.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that territoriality going on.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, with our phantom black dogs, we get the additional dimension of this idea of them sometimes blocking people from doing things that would be harmful to them. So, which you don't see so much in some of these other cryptid or apparitional creatures.
A lot of these instances where we see this activity or this guardianship or sentinel activity are in cemeteries.
Oh,
and, of course, we've had people that see Sasquatch on the periphery of these cemeteries, upright canines, a lot of different things. And even, of course, phantoms, not necessarily ghostly apparitions, but something that just, like these crawler humanoids and things like that. A lot of this, and I'm reading a book about that, and believe me, I'm coming up with all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So
just that, those things are just creepy. It's just not something I want to encounter. Give me a black dog any day. I'll take a black dog.
I agree with you. I don't necessarily want to see it, and I tell you, they do live an impression on people.
Oh yeah. It's one of the things you see about black dogs too, is that they really, I have a couple of stories in the book about people who saw a black dog, 60 years before, and it wasn't even a particularly impressive sighting, but it leaves an impression on them. And I think you see the same thing again in Sasquatch lore and the dogman lore, all these different creatures, where having an encounter with one of these things is a life-changing event. And it's something that I think investigators don't take into account sometimes. They're so busy jotting down, oh, well, it was this tall, and and it reached up to here, and it did this, and it walked this way, and there's these tracks, and da-da-da, or whatever. That they forget that there's a witness there.
Well, we have been working on this winged humanoid
Yeah.
stuff in Chicago and environs around Chicago and Lake Michigan. And,
Yeah. I
sure,
read
you can,
Tobias's book. Yeah.
yeah, you
It
can
was
take the
excellent.
reports and, well, he's written a book, I've written two, and it's just
Mhm.
we just keep going and going. And it just continues on. Now it's centered around O'Hara for the most part.
Yeah.
But it's,
Isn't there like a little cemetery there or something?
yeah, there
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And this is something we're intently working on now, trying to get an idea of what's going on. But that's another story. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But no,
So
that whole investigation has just, oh my God, it just has evolved into some really bizarre and fantastical results. And, we're actually involved with some possible communications with these beings now. And,
interesting.
we're just kind of laying back and let it come to us, and little by little, and
Hmm.
hopefully get some
Yeah.
answers. But that's the whole thing. We've been doing this now for 5 years, and we are looking for answers. And there's this, it's just a never-ending cycle.
Sometimes I
Hopefully, we're going
think
to come
that,
up.
yeah, sometimes I think that all of these things are just mysteries that are designed to keep us from getting into that mindset of we know all the answers now.
Oh
You
yeah,
know?
oh yeah,
But we were talking about cemeteries.
yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that you see a lot, phantom black dogs, dog men, like you said, Sasquatch also seen on the periphery of cemeteries. So all kind of, it's one of the I talk about in the book, places that you're most likely to see a black dog. And one of the places that you're most likely to see a black dog is in a cemetery,
Mm-hmm.
a churchyard, a cemetery, a cathedral where people are buried, even ancient Neolithic burial cairns in up in the Highlands in England.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Linda Godfrey points out in her Dogman books over and over and over again the correlation between the Dogman and these Indian burial mounds uh, throughout the Midwest there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, one of my fun stories in the book. This is a police officer in England. They call them constables. Um, was doing his nightly rounds and saw this large black dog running down the road, looked distressed. So he started to follow this dog, and the dog actually runs through the iron gate of the local cemetery and disappears into a headstone. um, so, we see there's also a story in the book about a family that were visiting the local cathedral in their one of the nearby towns, and they saw a black dog go racing down the side of this cathedral, and then turn and actually run into the foundation of the church. And you stop and think about that for a minute. It's like, okay, well, why is this thing going into a church? And then you realize that there are people buried inside those cathedrals.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you have that association with death and the dead. So the black dog of Via Crucis in North Carolina comes out of the cemetery churchyard at the Episcopal Church there. So again, you have black dogs associated with death, and the dead. And I mean, you can't get around that. You have that. You have the dogman and the burial mounds. You have Sasquatches appearing on the periphery of cemeteries. Um, and that's not to mention all the people who have experiences in cemeteries of ghostly or apparitional type experiences. So it all kinds of winds together, but it's all a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep saying, "Oh, well, I want answers." I don't know that. I mean, sometimes I wonder if I want answers. I don't really. I like the mystery. you know.
Yeah, I
Um,
guess we're chasing the answers, but do we really want them sometimes?
yeah,
You always get this thought of, well, if we figure this out, then the whole thing will be moot. But
well, and half
quite
the fun
frankly,
is
there's
developing
always
theories,
something.
right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Half the
Oh,
fun is
absolutely.
developing theories.
Absolutely.
I have a whole section on theories at the end of the book, ranging from the skeptic triad with, misidentifications and hallucinations and that's in just plain hoaxes. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously that happens sometimes, and we can't deny that that happens sometime. But I range it all out to spontaneous psychic events, and even the magical use of thought forms, which I talk about pretty extensively in the book.
Yeah,
So,
I'm really a proponent of that theory as well. Thought forms, I believe, are just part of the paranormal and cryptid activity. There's something there.
oh yeah,
It's hard to explain, but I think there really is something there. I had a
well,
question from Ancient Ruby.
sure.
Lon, can you ask Mr. Watson if it was the Runwell Church in Wickford, UK, that he says a black dog goes after the vicar?
No, actually, so the church story that I told was Bungay, England.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is Blytheborough or something along that line. Blythe something. I can't remember. There were two churches that the dog appeared at on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
The black dog doesn't actually go after the vicar. The black dog goes after people in the congregation. And a couple of the congregants were killed, and the one was injured. So that's kind of the essence of that story. What happens to the vicar is he's up on a ladder and he gets hit by lightning, which apparently he survives. But as far as we know, it didn't have anything to do with the black dog, except that black dogs also have a correlation to storms.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the black dog had something to do with this vicar getting hit by lightning. But in the story of a Coast Guard fellow named Graham in the UK, he sees this is in 1972, I believe. He sees a black dog running across a beach in Norfolk, which is black shuck territory.
Mm-hmm.
Black shuck is more of the scary black dog.
Mm-hmm.
He sees a black dog running across the beach in Norfolk. Doesn't think anything of it. He said it was about the size of a Labrador. So it was a good sized dog, but it wasn't massively huge. And he doesn't think anything unusual is going on until the black dog disappears right in front of him. Like he's looking at it and it vanishes.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes a note of telling people that the beach had been freshly bulldozed, so there was no place for a dog to hide. Now, the interesting thing about that is that within 24 to 48 hours after that sighting, a major gale came up. So and I talk about the association between black dogs and storms in the book a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little more tenuous association than some of the other things in the book, but it's still interesting because we do occasionally see them associated with storms, snowstorms, gales, thunderstorms, that sort of thing.
There's the one. Is it Fan Dog or what? Black Dog or what? The Beast of Dartmoor, and we hear about that in Great Britain. And
that was actually.
There have been photos of this thing as well,
oh, yeah.
though I don't know if those are legitimate or.
Yeah, the Beast of Dartmoor, if I'm getting my cryptid straight, is actually what the boards called an alien big cat. But yeah, again,
I mean, it's been referred to as a dog, cat, this, that. They don't really know what it is.
You have that critter that runs around in North Carolina called the Wampus cat.
Absolutely,
that is kind of something in between a dog and a cat. That
6 legs.
Just completely bizarre sounding creature, right? And nobody can decide whether this thing is a cat or a dog or somewhere in between or what the heck this thing is.
We have gotten some really bizarre Wampus cat sightings.
Oh, I'm sure
over the years, and these things show up in some of the most unbelievable places, like in the middle of a campus in some college.
Oh yeah,
it shows up, and it's bizarre. I don't know what the hell people are seeing. They swear it's flesh and blood and it's not an apparition, but take it for what that's worth.
And you have, and again, in the shapeshifter section, I talk of the book, I talk a little bit about how some of the people who've seen Phantom Black Dogs initially thought they were looking at a big cat.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sort of morphed into, your classic black dog. So, these creatures are not, your standard flesh and blood. I mean, in order to have an animal that actually could shift from one form to the other, would require an enormous power outlay
Oh yeah.
in the physical world. But if you're talking about an apparitional creature, something that pops through the veil and doesn't
Mhm.
have a full physical presence here, one imagines that it can take whatever form it wants.
Absolutely.
There are legends of the phantom black dogs in some sections of England that appear as black goats, and other black animals. So
Yeah, it runs the gamut. It actually
oh yeah,
it's bizarre. So so Travis, I'd like for you to tell folks how they can get in contact with you. I think you have another book coming up as well. You announced it today. Tell us what's going on.
Okay, so the first of all, Phantom Black Dogs Walkers, the Liminal Way, is available on Amazon right now. I believe that the distribution will go wider at some point, but I'm not sure. I don't know at this point. I do have another book coming out. It's contracted. It's due on the 1st of December. I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to give the idea away.
I'm in the same boat, man. I understand it.
Suffice to say that whereas this book focused on one paranormal occurrence, the next book is going to run the gamut, because I'm going to be talking about everything from Sasquatch to UFOs to mysterious disappearances in this book, and tying them all together in a way that I think people will find to be really unique.
Right.
You can find me on social media. As you mentioned, I'm Will Watson on Facebook. And I also have a author page under W.T. Watson. I think I gave you the stuff for show notes, so you've got links. I'm also on Twitter as W.T. Watson, and I'm on Instagram as well. So those are all ways that you can reach out to me. I've actually had at least one person who submitted an eyewitness black dog account since seeing about me on social media. So I'm perfectly happy to get witness accounts from anybody.
Oh, I get it. That's how I survive. So.
Yeah, I mean that's what you do, Lon. And you are the man at it. But I'm perfectly happy to see witness accounts and to hear what people have to say about phantom black dogs and other paranormal occurrences. Because I've like I said, I've been studying this stuff. I started off in high strangeness in elementary school when my dad told me about his UFO encounter.
Oh.
And then I read Ripley's Believe It or Not comic book about ghost stories. And those two things got me going. And, by the time I was in 6th grade, I had read Ivan Sanderson's Abominable Snowmen.
Absolutely.
The legend comes to life. And I just went from there. Frank Edwards, UFOs, you name it. I was into it.
Yeah, we all got hooked early. It's kind of lingered on, but it's what we do.
Then you had your own personal experiences
absolutely.
To add to the mix too.
So when this other book comes out, let me know, and when you want to come on, and we will book you on here, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I'll be more than happy to do that. And I just wanted to take a minute to express my thanks to you for keeping Phantoms and Monsters running for all these years, because it can be discouraging sometimes. Being involved in this stuff, because you tend to get a little isolated, because the stuff you want to talk about, other people look at you like you're mad. My poor spouse is constantly like, okay, whatever, honey. You're doing research on what?
Yeah, I get it.
So it's nice to see that that not only are these things like phantom black dogs and dogmen and UFOs and these walker things and all of this stuff still happening and happening right now and happening to people that you might live next door to.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to know that there's someone out there who's still collecting those stories, who's putting those stories out there. I mean, you don't have to believe everything people tell you, but when you have a bunch of witnesses testifying to the same thing, and it's a cogent story like your phantom black dogs, you have to think something's going on. If you were in a court of law and you had a whole bunch of people telling you that they saw X, eventually, that becomes proof.
Yeah.
We're not going to prove this stuff scientifically. Because
that's pretty obvious at this point.
Because phantom black dogs are not going to sit still and repeat their appearances over and over again so they can be monitored. You saw this in the book, the Hunt for Skinwalker that I referenced early. The NIDS scientists thought they were going to set up and do research on UFOs, and they got everything but UFOs.
Absolutely.
Because the phenomena don't sit still, for people to monitor. And, so getting scientific evidence of any of this stuff, I don't care, whether you're talking about Sasquatch or dogmen or phantom black dogs or UFOs or any of this stuff, getting scientific evidence of that stuff is going to be hard. It's going to be really, really hard.
Well, Travis, I want to again thank you for coming on the show, and we'll definitely have you back. And just have a nice weekend, and we will talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you about phantom black dogs and other stuff.
Okay, you take care now.
Take care. You too.
Bye-bye. Now, if you have an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through the Phantoms and Monsters blog site. Now, I want to again thank W.T. Watson for joining me this evening. And thanks to each and all of you for watching and chatting. If you made a super chat donation, it's truly appreciated. Your support is what makes this all possible. So like us, subscribe, and share. Now, next week, I will be joined by film and television screenwriter, producer, and talk show host Doug Hychek. And Doug was the screenwriter and producer of the well-renowned Monster Quest television series and the popular film Sasquatch Legend Meets Science. So be sure to join us for what promises to be an interesting and entertaining show. So until next week, stay healthy and have a safe and enjoyable weekend. Good night.